Have you ever gone looking at old comic books and seen this logo? I'm sure you have, but why was it there in the first place? Well, let me explain. This is the symbol for the Comics Code Authority. But what is that and what do they do? Short answer, government censorship. Long answer, let's get into it. It might be a little bit weird to think about it now, but back in the 1950s, superheroes weren't the biggest deal. In fact, some of the biggest selling comic books at the time were actually westerns, romance stories, and horror stories. And honestly, going all the way back to the 40s, the government was trying to get involved in censoring comic books. But everything kind of ramped up with the introduction of this man, Frederick Wertham, author of the book Seduction of the Innocent, in which Dr. Wertham fabricated studies where he said that reading comic books turned kids into juvenile delinquents and, at some points, gay. Yeah, I'm not even kidding either. He actually thought that comic books would corrupt the youth. Funny enough, the characters he cited the most in his false studies saying that they would turn kids homosexual was Batman. Specifically because they don't understand how Batman can be living with a young boy like that. And that's why we have Batgirl, specifically to throw off those rumors. But because comic books had gotten so dark in the 50s, so the publishers began self-censoring to avoid government interference by creating an organization known as the Comics Magazine Association of America, where they had to abide by certain rules, like criminals can't be sympathetic. They couldn't use the words horror or terror in the titles. The good guy always has to win, and women had to be drawn with realistic proportions. And these rules were called the Comics Code. Eventually, things started to get more edgy again into the 80s. And at that point, they basically stopped using the Comics Code and decided they would publish exactly what they wanted to. But this was basically all built off of a lie and the idea that they didn't want to have grotesque, gruesome, and vile comic books in the 50s. And if you're interested, I mean, there are covers out there that can't even be shown on YouTube due to terms of service. Because even 70 years ago, the covers were that graphic. And because of this and the fact that they didn't want the government to be directly involved, they began to self-police. I mean, if you really think about it, the amount of freedom that current comic books have compared to what they had even 40 years ago when the code was still active is insane.
Like and subscribe.